My name's Andy and I'm one of the lecturers down at Unitec. I teach automotive, and quite often at home, when I'm not teaching, I do home jobs and I see all sorts of vehicles come through the workshop. And just behind me is a little Toyota RAV4, 1996 I think it is, and it had a wheel bearing play on the front left. I've got to replace the CV boot, so I'm going to show you how to replace a CV boot, a real easy way of doing it, on a little RAV4. So here we go. Okay, so before we start to pull out the drive shaft, and this is the front drive shaft that provides drive to the front left wheel, you can see, pretty common fault, the CV boot has split. Now this vehicle goes up and down a gravel road every day. As you can see, all the dust and grit and stuff on the sides. And having a CV boot that's ripped like that is not only going to allow the grease to spray out, so the joint's not lubricated, but it's going to allow contaminants to get in, which unfortunately has probably already happened, and that's going to wear that joint prematurely, and it's going to start to click. Now obviously the big problem is when it stops clicking, that's when the joint's going to explode, and it can actually cause the steering on the vehicle to jam as well. It can impede the steering, not only lose drive, and it can cause an accident, so it is quite a serious issue. Having the knuckle joint already stripped off, it really would be crazy not to replace this CV boot at the same time, as really most of the work is already done. So I'm going to pull out the drive shaft and we'll go from there. Okay, so to help with the camera and for you guys to see what's going on, you can see now very clearly the drive shaft, the front drive shaft, which is coming out of the gearbox, just there, look, the front wheel drive gearbox, and coming down to the outer CV joint. Now up here, this is not a CV joint. Inside there is a tripod joint, and that has very different characteristics, and in your transmission course you're going to learn all about what the difference is. And a tripod joint allows for the shaft to get longer and shorter to compensate for suspension compression. A CV joint, a constant velocity joint, allows for a much greater degree of angular turning on the shaft, which allows the car to have a better turning circle. So there you go, easy. Right, shaft coming out. Okay, so easiest way I've found to get these drive shafts out is just to remove the large clip on the tripod boot, and usually they just pull straight out of the tripod. Sometimes there is a bit of a circlip in there you've got to deal with as well. But now we have on the bench one drive shaft. And you can see now that's the three inner races, the three bearings that sit within inside the tripod joint. What we're interested in today is this little one here called the CV joint. We're going to pull that apart and change the boot. Okay, so when you buy a new CV boot kit, you will get one of these, a rubber universal size, usually, CV boot. They'll need to know what vehicle it's to go on because there are different diameters. The large diameter can be different for various vehicles, as can the small one for the drive shaft as well. You get two new clips, and I'm going to show you how to install those. And yes, I am going to use a special tool, but those special tools are very cheap and you can buy them at the same time as buying the boot. And a sachet of grease, pretty much just standard old grease. And we'll be using the sachet on the CV boot, and I'll just use some regular grease out of a grease cartridge for the tripod joint when we refill that with grease as well. Okay, so we're going to use this kit and we're going to stick that boot onto the CV joint, and I'll show you how. Now, if you clean off the what should be grease, but it's almost turned to oil for some reason. If you look in there, you will see, if I can rotate it round, a little circlip. Now this is the tripod joint, and we're just going to pull that off the shaft because we're doing this, we're changing the CV boot without using any special tools. Okay, you can actually get spreaders that spread out the old boot, and I'll show you what a new boot looks like shortly. So we use a pair of circlip pliers, and we should be able to get into there. Hopefully you're not going to block the camera too much. And we can open that out. You use a little flat screwdriver as well, that's quite useful. Just a hook underneath. Oh, got a bit of man flu going on. Oh, there you go, and she's off. Okay, 1, Can you see that okay? One little circlip. We need to keep hold of that because that is the part we're going to be using again. Now, normally, and every car's different, that should just pull off there. And this one's different. So we'll give it a little tap with the old magic hammer. Now, magic hammer is a copper hammer, which is just down here somewhere. So I call this a magic hammer, and it's got copper at one end and hide at the other end. It's really, really useful because it doesn't damage stuff too much. And again, make sure you keep note of which way on that goes, because we'll need to know that for later on. Now you can see all that gloop in there. That's not normal. That should be grease, which is very strange. But anyway, not to worry. And we've got another little clip to cut down here, so we're going to need some more side cutters. These clips are available without buying CV boots, by the way. You can just get them from your local store. Very cheap. Aluminium type clips, they're really easy to cut through usually. And what you shouldn't do, you shouldn't use cable ties or zip ties for this kind of stuff, because they're just not strong enough and they don't hold the boot on the shaft and locate it in the groove that's on the shaft. What inevitably happens is they slip out of the groove, and then they leak all their grease everywhere, which again means that they don't have any lubrication, and that grease can get onto brake components and stuff as well, which is a bit of a problem. Okay, so here goes nothing. Lots and lots of grease to come off. I'm just going to work that up the shaft. There we go. Put it over here, and that can drain all that horrible sludge out of it. And we'll give that a clean later on. Oh, another rag, plenty of rags, and we'll refill it with fresh grease on reassembly. Now, if we'd had the special spreader tool for the CV boot, we wouldn't need to do this bit. In fact, we could probably fit the CV boot, which is normal practice in a workshop, to fit the CV boot on the car. But this video is geared up for you guys who don't have a workshop full of all the really cool special tools that garages have. This is a way of doing stuff still in a professional manner, hopefully, at home with really sort of basic tools. Now, CV boot end. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, hopefully you can see what's going on. Always use a vise for this kind of stuff. Really important that the drive shaft's held in position. Now again, you can see some more of these little clips. We're going to cut through those. Now this time it doesn't matter about the boot. It doesn't matter if we destroy it because it's already going to go in the bin. There's one. And the other one is under all this gunk on this side. There we go. Two. Easy. Now, without cutting my fingers off, use a blade, slice through the boot, and that can help get it off a lot easier as well later on, just taking the pressure off that joint. Where it crimps over into the groove, trying to minimise contamination of the joint. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, okay. More rags required, lots of gloop on there. Now, whilst we're in here, we can check the joint. It wasn't clicking or making any nasty noises while we were driving it, doing a test drive before the job. So it's not going to get replaced today, but just to show you how to check a CV joint while it's out, which again is part of the course that I teach. Very useful, more rags required. Right, back in the vise, because we're going to hold that drive shaft stationary to do the check. Okay, so can see that okay. Terrible camera angle, sorry, there we go. Alright, so the drive shaft, the drive comes down the shaft and is transferred through the CV joint down to the wheel. Now if there's wear in the joint, if you do a rotational movement on there, can you hear that? Okay, it's got about 1/2 mil of movement. Don't want any more than that. Okay, it should also rotate freely, and if the joint's contaminated or badly worn, it usually jams. It feels very rough. You can split these joints down, have a look at them. Nowadays they're a replaceable unit. You don't rebuild or refurbish these joints. They just get thrown away and put in the bin. So taking them off the drive shaft is often quite difficult. They can be a real pain in the ass. At the end of the drive shaft is a little circlip. Now you can't get to the circlip, that's hidden inside the joint. Instead, you need to use one of these. And you'd use there you go, slide hammer. Now the slide hammer, you need to make some kind of attachment, or you can buy them, that goes onto the threads, and so you get different ends for them, and when you bang that, it pulls the joint off. And it's important that you use one of these because it gives a nice central pull to the joint, and it gives you the best chance of getting that circlip to collapse and go into the groove and allow the joint to come off the shaft. I say best chance, doesn't always work. Sometimes that circlip's been damaged in the past and not renewed. Sometimes it pops out of the groove on one side and again jams, and these can be a real pain. So just the CV boot for today. Okay, right, what we can do now is just stand that in the end in there. Look, a great idea to use soft jaw vice grips so you don't damage any of the splines and stuff. If you haven't got those, which most people don't have, you can use some good strong cardboard. It's also a really easy way of how to prevent damage to components. You don't want to be doing that. Okay, so before we slide the new boot on, I'm just going to make sure that the shaft is reasonably clear of all the bits and pieces, because we don't want to drag all this down into the joint itself. And just be sure to make sure that you don't fly the crap into the joint. The whole idea of this operation is to try and preserve that joint from getting any more contaminated. This is all the dust and grime and grit off the gravel roads that she's been driving on. Living drivers, eh? Okay, that's pretty much all of it. And we'll just give it a quick. That's brake cleaner, by the way. It's brilliant for cleaning everything and brakes. Very good degreasing, very quick. As you can see, it dries immediately. Good for degreasing stuff. Making these look professional again. Right. So we'll pop that back in there. Not too tight, don't want to damage the splines. That will cause problems later on. Okay, one boot. Here we have it. The boot that we showed you earlier on. Sorry, that me and the camera showed you earlier on. There you go, and it goes on in that orientation. Slide it all the way down without smacking yourself in your face. And you'll see, if I can get it beyond, you'll see an indent in the shaft. Sorry, I'm terrible at videos. You'll see an indent in the shaft there, look, and that's where that small opening on the boot needs to sit, so that when we clamp it up with the new clip, it'll push it into that groove and it'll give it positive location. So we'll just wind that back up again. Now when you're doing this, you don't really want to cover the whole thing in grease in there, because it's going to make it easier for it to slide out, and that's supposed to be a nice dry fit. And then we can flick it upside down. It doesn't matter really clamping the shaft in that position, because that's not where there's any splines and stuff. And now we can pop the grease in. Oh, man flu. I hate man flu. Okay. Snippers. Well, we'll use that. That's useful. Okay. Don't chop fingers off. Right. Okay. Grease. Yeah. plenty of grease. And you need plenty in there, but it needs to have air gaps as well. This grease is going to warm up as the vehicle's in use, and if it's got nowhere to expand into, it's going to pop that boot off, which again is a common problem. That'll do. I don't want to go mad. Alright. Now notice that I've tried to keep as much grease off the boot as I can. I don't want lots of that grease getting onto the boot where it sits on the actual outer hub of the CV joint. So there you go. That was actually quite well done. Not normally that happens. So just wipe off any excess. We don't want to flick that up onto the brakes when we're driving down the road. And now we're ready, already, so quick, to fit the clips. So here we go. We need a special tool, and that special tool looks a bit like that. And in New Zealand they're about 20 bucks. I bought this one about 8 years ago. I've used it probably 50 times. So it's more than paid for itself. It pays to buy a good quality one, because the cheap ones, well, they're just cheap and they're going to break. So then you've got to buy a new one. So buy a decent one and it'll last you a lifetime. Don't lend it to your mate, because if you do, you'll never see it again. Top tip number 1 for your tools: don't lend them out. Always keep them in sight. Okay, now clips. I just want to get those. And we may as well do the large one first, since that's already pointing up in the sky. And you can change the size of these clips depending on how much. It can go bigger by pushing that back out of there again, and then she'll go huge, so you can use it for something really big. It's very useful, and you can buy these, buy the 10s. And we're going to go for a double wrap size, so we're going to poke that back through there again. Sorry, I normally look quite gormless when I'm doing this. Right, there you go. So one size clip, that pops into the groove. Try and do this so you can see it. Alright, and then we just pull on that, and that's going to clamp the whole thing down. It's not often I do this kind of thing to camera, so we'll see what happens. Okay, now this tool, just to show you how it works, has got 2 parts. We've got this one here, which, where's the camera? There we are. Which has got, can you see that air gap? There you go. Okay, it's got a little groove in it. And what we need to do is to feed this little tongue here through that, and then we can wind it in like a winch. But before it gets to there, it has to go through this little groove at the front. Where are you, camera? There you go. Okay. And there's also, when we finish doing the tensioning, there's a little cutter, which is just there, look. Yeah, I'm really not geared up for TV, am I? Okay, right. So, what we'll do is we'll pop that, make sure the cutter's away from the clip. If we do it that way around, you won't be able to see better. And then we are going to pop it through the groove. Oh, look at that. Okay, we're in. Make sure it's hard up to there, and then we can start to winch. Start to tighten the whole thing up. Now, because it's double wrapped, we've gone off a bit. Because it's double wrapped, that's terrible. We will start again. Okay. Sorry, all that camera stuff has caused me to slip it off the groove. Right, so it's got to sit in that groove. There we go. We're on, pretty much. So it's important to take your time and don't try and film what you're doing at the same time. And then we can start to winch the whole thing in. There we go. Okay. Now, you don't have to go mad. We're not trying to do a Hercules on this one. But it's got to be reasonably tight. And we can tension it up using the little arm on the tool there. Once we're happy it's in the right place, we need to bring the tool round to 90 degrees to the joint. Because if we don't, as soon as we cut it, it's going to spring back open again. And then we can get the cutter and we can cut through there, fold it back, and now you can relax because it's not going to go anywhere. And we need a little hammer, and I do have one, especially prepared for the job, just to tap this part here flat to give it a nice positive lock. So that's now locked, and then you've got these 2 little tabs, and you just bend those over, and that holds the whole thing in place. There you go. And that's it, done. It's really easy, and I don't understand why so many garages insist on using cable ties, because cable ties don't work. They're not designed for this job, and they shouldn't be used. So there you go, that's my rant over. Okay, now we flick it over, and we now need to do the clip on this side. So we'll give it another go. No harm in you guys seeing two lots done. Alright, so we'll just line that up. Now your tool's still going to have the old bit of excess clip in there, so you just pull that out, and you know, like a shotgun, it fires out. Again, through the front slot. Okay, through the cutter, which I didn't line up very well. And then, if there's enough, hopefully there is. Yeah, only just, actually. We're going to go for a double wrap again because it's a lot stronger. Okay. Hopefully this will, not quite. Let's just give it a minute. Let's try and pull a bit more excess out of there, and we can put a little bit of a bend on it to hold it for us. Make life a bit easier. Life's hard enough as it is. Through there. Dunk, 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 through the cutter. Pull the slotty thing up, and then slide it over the, there we go. Right. All the way down to there. Okay, I'm going to do this one the other way up because of the cutter and that we're against the boot, so you can't see this one quite so well, but you saw it on the previous one. Just straighten that a bit. Hey, there's no point in rushing these videos. We've got a lot to make. Okay, so we're now lined up on there, and we can start to tension. Now again, this is only a small clip, so it doesn't need a lot of tensioning, okay? It's quite easy to do and pretty tight, so we can turn it around to 90 degrees, and then we can cut it again. Click, there we go, done. Okay, little hammer, give it a tap, and if we can get under there and bend that one up, there we go. Done. Okay, how much better does that look? Almost looks professional. Remember how dirty and split and degreased it was and full of crap? Well, it's going to pass an English MOT now, and well, it would have passed a New Zealand WOF anyway, but that's what it should look like. Now, all that's left to do is to reinstate the tripod joint. So I'm going to have to give that tripod boot a really good clean out. You don't need to see that. I'm sure you guys are pretty good at cleaning things out. And once it's clean, we'll start the tape again. I'm back. Okay, so back a bit, there we go. Right, we're going to. So I've cleaned up the tripod boot joint, the boot, and it's all reinstated back in the groove on the drive shaft. Really, all that's left to do now is to pop the actual tripod joint back onto the shaft. These won't come off, don't worry, there's little circlips at the end. And there we go, look at that, you see? Almost pushes on. And we'll just give it a little light tap with the magic hammer. Making sure it's all the way down to the bottom. We can use the hide end as well, there we go, look. Hide ends are really good old cows. Right. And make sure it's all the way down so it's exposed to the groove for the circlip. And here is the circlip. Circlips only go on one way, and I've put the circlip pliers away, so we'll get those out again. Okay. So remember the way it came off, assuming the previous mechanic, if there's been one in there, has put it on correctly. The way that they're stamped out of the sheet dictates that they are only a single way. You couldn't put it on that way because it's chances are it might actually come off again. So we're going to fit it the correct way and pop it on the end of the shaft. Put your finger in the middle bit, just holding it down, putting some pressure on, and then you can open it up with your circlip pliers. Give it a little tap, and she's on. Job done. It really is that easy. Okay, right, I'm going to pop this back into the vehicle, put another couple of clips on. It's a bit more difficult in the vehicle, so you don't need to see that. And then I'll move on to fitting the knuckle joint which is the original problem of the vehicle. So there you go. This is, or that was in fact, how to fit a CV boot, okay, without the proper tools, other than the one for doing the clips, which is really useful and very cheap, and you should have one. If you're going to call yourself a mechanic, you need one, okay? Great job. Cheers.